Chapter 1. The Midnight Leak. The Apex bottling plant sat like a rusted crown atop the skyline of Onyx Harbor, New Viridia. Inside, the air tasted of ozone and synthetic citrus. Victor Vane stood on the catwalk, staring down at Vat 7. It wasn't bubbling with the usual neon green hue of Ameliorate 3X. It was glowing with a pulsing violet rhythm. Compound X, 7 had leaked through the corroded gaskets, and the reaction was beautiful. "Sir, the stabilization levels are failing," the chief engineer shouted over the hum of the machinery. "If we bottle this now, the molecular structure is too volatile. We don't know what it will do to human DNA. We need to initiate a lockdown and notify the Department of Health." Vane didn't even look at him. He checked his watch. The shipment was due at the shipping docks in 4 hours. A delay meant a 10% drop in stock value. To Vane, people were just biological machines, and machines needed fuel. "The public wants energy," Vane whispered, his voice cold. "We're going to give them enough energy to change the world." He reached over and pulled the manual override lever. The violet liquid surged into the bottling lines, hissing as it hit the cold glass. The engineer tried to stop him, but Vane pushed him aside. In the chaos, a pipe burst, spraying Vane directly in the face with the raw concentrate. He didn't scream. He watched as his veins turned purple, and the clock on the wall seemed to slow down until it stopped entirely. He could see the individual atoms of the air vibrating. He didn't just feel caffeinated, he felt like a god. By dawn, 3 million cans had been loaded onto trucks. The accident was logged as a simple steam leak. The factory workers were paid off, the sensors were wiped, and the poison was sent into the veins of New Viridia. Chapter 2. The First Sip. The sun rose over New Viridia with an eerie orange glow. At a local gym, Sarah, a powerlifter struggling with a 400-pound squat, cracked open a cold can of Ameliorate 3X. She noticed the liquid looked slightly thicker than usual, shimmering like liquid silk, but she didn't care. She needed the kick. Across town, the conjoined twins, Leo and Jax, were sharing a megacan at a bus stop, arguing as they always did. Leo wanted to go to the beach. Jax wanted to stay in the shade. They drank simultaneously, their shared heart skipping a beat the moment the liquid hit their stomachs. In the suburbs, Marcus the window washer, Toby the delivery driver, and Arthur the librarian all took their morning dose of the city's favorite drink. It started as a warmth in the chest, a pleasant heat that quickly turned into a raging fire. For Sarah, the barbell suddenly felt like it was made of styrofoam. She accidentally threw it through the ceiling when she tried to rack it. For Leo and Jax, their skin began to steam. One side of their body turned red hot while the other began to sprout frost. Panic hit the city faster than the caffeine. People weren't just waking up, they were ascending. Reports started flooding the emergency lines. A man was floating over the interstate, a woman's hair had grown 30 feet in seconds, and a delivery driver had run from one end of the state to the other in 4 minutes. The Ameliorate effect had begun. Chapter 3. The Ghost in the Library. Arthur Pringle had always been the kind of man people looked past. As a librarian in the New Viridia archives, he lived a life of silence and shadows. When he drank his Ameliorate 3X that morning, he just wanted to get through a long shift of filing tax records. But as the Compound X7 surged through his system, his deepest wish, to be left alone, became a physical reality. He was standing in the middle of the history aisle when his hands began to shimmer. He looked down and saw the floorboards through his palms. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. It was as if the air around him was absorbing the vibrations of his voice. He was becoming a hole in the world. A group of teenagers ran through the library, shouting about the fire-breathing twins seen downtown. They ran right through the space where Arthur was standing. He braced for the impact, but they passed through him like he was a mist. He wasn't just invisible, he was intangible. He realized then that he could hear everything. The heartbeat of the birds outside, the hum of the city's power grid, the whispered secrets of people blocks away. This was organic stealth, a total shutdown of his presence in the physical world. While the rest of the state was loud and destructive with their new powers, Arthur became the silent observer. He realized he could see things no one else could, including the black Apex bottling trucks lurking on street corners, picking up people who had changed. The cover-up wasn't over. It was just entering its second phase. Chapter 4. The Skyward Ascent. Marcus Thorne had always hated heights, which was the irony of his life as a high-rise window washer. On the morning the spiced violet batch hit the shelves, he was suspended on the 40th floor of the Vane International Tower. His hands were shaking from a lack of sleep, so he cracked open a can of Ameliorate 3X. The liquid felt heavy, sliding down his throat like molten silver. Suddenly, the vertigo didn't just vanish. It was replaced by a pulling sensation in his navel, as if gravity had lost its grip on him. Then the cable snapped. The mechanical failure was sudden and violent. Marcus plummeted, the wind whipping past his ears as the street rushed up to meet him. He squeezed his eyes shut and braced for the end, but the impact never came. Instead of a crash, he felt a strange buoyancy. When he opened his eyes, he was hovering 10 feet above a crowded sidewalk. People were screaming, filming him with their phones. He wasn't falling. He was bobbing in the air like a cork in water. With a tentative thought, he leaned forward, and his body shot across the intersection at 50 miles per hour. He was the Skyward Guard, though he didn't know it yet. Below him, he saw a city in chaos. Cars flipped by invisible forces and fire licking the sides of buildings. He realized he could see for miles. From his vantage point, he spotted a young woman, Sarah, accidentally crushing a bus stop bench. He realized he wasn't the only one. He banked left, soaring toward the smoke, realizing that New Viridia needed a watcher. Chapter 5, The Laboratory of Souls. Dr. Eris sat in his basement, clutching his head as the walls began to vibrate. He had been the one to warn Victor Vane about the bioactive properties of Compound X, 7, but he hadn't realized he'd already inhaled the fumes before being fired. Now his brain felt like it was expanding against his skull. Every thought was a thunderclap. He looked at a coffee mug on his desk. It exploded into porcelain shards. He looked at a chair. It slid across the floor. Telekinesis, he whispered, but he didn't hear his own voice. Instead, he heard the voice of his neighbor 3 houses down thinking about what to cook for dinner. Then he heard another voice, cold, fast, and sharp. It was Victor Vane. The CEO's thoughts were moving at a rhythmic, mechanical speed, broadcasting from the Apex bottling plant like a radio tower. Eris realized his mind had become a receiver. He could feel the signatures of the others who had drunk the tainted batch. He felt the burning heat of the twins, the vibrating speed of the delivery driver, and the fading presence of Arthur the librarian. But he also felt Vane's intent, containment. Vane wasn't planning on helping these people. He was planning on recalling them like defective products. Eris reached out with his mind, trying to project a warning to the others. He became Cerebro, the psychic anchor for a team that hadn't even met yet. Chapter 6, Frozen Fire. Leo and Jax were currently the most dangerous attraction in New Viridia. The conjoined twins were trapped in an alleyway behind a convenience store, their bodies a battlefield of physics. Leo's right arm was wreathed in a continuous, roaring flame that didn't burn his skin, but melted the brickwork behind him. Jax's left arm was encased in a jagged sleeve of black ice, and the ground beneath his feet was a treacherous sheet of frozen slush. "Stop it, Jax! You're freezing my side," Leo screamed, his breath coming out as literal sparks. "I can't help it. You're trying to cook us alive," Jax retorted, his voice echoing with the crackle of breaking glaciers. A police cruiser pulled into the alley, sirens blaring. The officers stepped out, guns drawn, terrified by the spectacle of the two-headed anomaly. In their panic, one officer fired. Time seemed to slow. Leo's instinct took over. He swung his hand, and a gout of white-hot fire vaporized the bullet in midair. Jax, sensing the heat, countered by slamming his palm onto the pavement. A massive wall of ice, 5 feet thick, erupted from the ground, barricading them from the police. They weren't just brothers anymore. They were a living engine of elemental destruction. They realized they couldn't stay in the shadows. If they didn't learn to balance the fire and the ice, they would tear each other and the city apart. Just then, a voice echoed in both of their heads. "Run to the harbor," the voice of Dr. Eris commanded. "The others are coming." Chapter 7, The Mock Break. Toby Miller was a man who lived by the clock. As a courier for quick-drop deliveries, his life was a series of timed sprints through the gridlocked streets of Onyx Harbor. He had chugged his Ameliorate 3X while stuck behind a garbage truck. By the time he hit the next red light, his leg was twitching so fast it was a blur. When he finally stepped on the gas, he realized the car was moving too slow. He stepped out of the vehicle while it was still rolling, and the world simply stopped. Raindrops hung in the air like glass beads. A pigeon was frozen mid-flap next to his head. Toby took a step, and the friction of his sneakers against the pavement caused a small plume of smoke. He ran. He wasn't just fast, he was a kinetic anomaly. He crossed the Viridia Bridge in 3 seconds, a sonic boom trailing behind him that shattered the windows of every car he passed. But the speed came with a terrifying price. His heart was hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, and he felt a ravenous, gnawing hunger. He realized that if he stopped moving too suddenly, the momentum might liquefy his bones. He saw a blurred figure in the sky, Marcus, the skyward guard, and realized he wasn't alone in this hyper-accelerated nightmare. He adjusted his course, heading toward the industrial district, a golden streak of lightning cutting through the frozen city. Chapter 8: The Velvet Lasso. Elena Vance was midway through a highlight treatment at the Silver Mane salon when the tremors started. She had been sipping the 3X energy drink all morning to keep up with her back-to-back appointments. As the compound X7 integrated with her biology, she felt a sharp, pulling sensation at her scalp. Suddenly, her chestnut hair began to grow. It didn't just grow long, it grew with a life of its own. Within seconds, 6 feet of hair was coiling around her chair like a nest of vipers. Her client screamed, but Elena was more shocked by the sensation. She could feel through the strands. Each hair was an extension of her nervous system, sensitive to the vibrations in the air. When a panicked driver crashed through the salon's front window, Elena didn't even think. Her hair lashed out, thick and strong as steel cables, catching the car and halting it inches from her station. She pulled the hair back, and it retracted with effortless grace, braiding itself into a complex, defensive crown around her head. She looked in the mirror and saw her eyes glowing with a faint violet light. She wasn't just a stylist anymore. She was a living weaver of silk and steel. She stepped out into the street, her hair lengthening to grip the lamp posts, swinging her body upward toward the rooftops. She had to find out what was happening to her city. Chapter 9: The Odds of Survival. Lucky Lou wasn't feeling very lucky. He sat in the back of a smoky dive bar, staring at a losing hand of poker and a half-empty can of Ameliorate. He was down $10,000 to a group of Apex bottling security contractors. He took a long swig of the drink, hoping the caffeine would clear his head. Instead, it cleared his vision. Suddenly, Lou saw glowing lines connecting everything in the room. He saw the percentage of every possible outcome floating in the air. The probability of the dealer having an ace? 0.02%. The probability of the ceiling fan falling? 15%. Lou realized he could nudge those numbers. He closed his eyes and pushed his thoughts against the air. When he opened them, he drew a card. It was the exact card he needed. The contractors didn't like losing. One pulled a pistol, but Lou didn't flinch. He saw the trajectory of the bullet, a 99% chance it would hit his chest. He flicked his wrist, nudging the probability of a misfire to 100%. The gun jammed. Lou walked out of the bar as the building behind him suffered a statistically impossible series of electrical failures that knocked out his pursuers. He was roulette, and for the first time in his life, the house wasn't going to win. Chapter 10: The Canvas of Chaos. Mia Sterling lived in an attic studio filled with half-finished paintings and the smell of turpentine. She had been drinking Ameliorate 3X to finish her Surrealist City series, unaware that the compound X7 was reacting to her highly creative brain chemistry. As she took the final gulp, the colors on her palette didn't just look vivid. They began to bleed off the wood and swirl in the air. She reached out to touch a painted door on her canvas, and to her horror, her hand went through it. She felt the cool draft of a hallway that shouldn't exist. Mia was no longer just an artist, she was a reality warper. Panicked, she stepped back, and her thoughts manifested a swarm of neon butterflies that fluttered around the room, each one leaving a trail of shimmering distortion. The world around her became a playground of what if? She looked at her wooden chair, and with a stray thought, it turned into a pile of velvet cushions. She looked at the window, and the glass turned into a liquid lens that showed her the street 5 blocks away. But the power was exhausting. Reality was like a stretched rubber band, and she could feel it wanting to snap back. She realized that if she lost control, she might accidentally erase herself. She needed to find someone who understood the science behind this magic. Chapter 11: The Unbreakable Sarah. While others were discovering strange, ethereal powers, Sarah was dealing with the brutal reality of super strength. After accidentally destroying her gym, she had retreated to an abandoned shipyard in Onyx Harbor. She needed to know her limits. She walked up to a rusted shipping container, 40,000 pounds of steel, and pushed. It didn't just move. It flew across the yard like a kicked soda can. "Whoa," she whispered. She picked up a jagged piece of scrap metal and tried to cut her forearm. The steel snapped in half against her skin, leaving not even a scratch. She was invulnerable. But the strength came with a heavy cost to her sensory input. Every time she stepped, the concrete cracked. When she tried to pick up her phone, it shattered into a million pieces of glass and silicon. She felt like a monster in a world made of cardboard. She sat on a massive anchor, weeping, only to realize her tears were heavy enough to dent the metal below. Just then, she heard a heavy thud from above. She looked up to see Marcus, the skyward guard, descending from the clouds. "You're like me," he said, his voice echoing in the vast shipyard. "You're changed. And there are people coming to take us back to the factory." Sarah stood up, the ground groaning under her feet. For the first time, she didn't feel like a monster. She felt like a soldier. Chapter 12, Phase Shift. Maya, the parkour athlete, was currently stuck, literally inside a brick wall. She had been sprinting across a rooftop, chugging an Ameliorate 3X when she tripped. Instead of slamming into the chimney, she had slipped right through it. Now her legs were vibrating at a frequency that made them ghostly and translucent, while her upper body remained solid. "Focus, Maya. Just move," she hissed to herself. She closed her eyes and visualized her atoms slowing down. With a sickening pop, she stumbled out of the brickwork and fell onto the gravel. She realized she could control her density. She could become as light as a cloud, passing through solid matter, or as heavy as a mountain, becoming an immovable object. She tested it by walking toward the edge of the roof. She stepped off into the empty air, and for a second she plummeted. But then she shifted her density, becoming so light that the wind actually caught her and drifted her toward the next building. It wasn't flight like Marcus's, but it was a form of gliding through the physical world. She saw a black SUV with the Apex bottling logo screech to a halt below. Men in tactical gear stepped out, holding glowing energy nets. Maya smirked, her body turning into a gray mist. "Good luck catching a ghost," she whispered, and vanished through the roof of the car. Chapter 13, The Primal Instinct. Officer Ben sat in his cruiser, the air conditioner blasting to combat the strange, humid heat radiating from his skin. He had been AK-9 handler for 5 years, and his partner, a German shepherd named Kaiser, sat in the back. Ben took a swig of Ameliorate 3X to stay sharp during the riot calls, but as the compound X7 hit his system, his senses didn't just sharpen, they exploded. He could smell the gunpowder on a shell casing 3 blocks away. He could hear the heartbeat of every person in the crowded square. Suddenly, Kaiser growled, but it wasn't a sound Ben heard with his ears. It was a sensation he felt in his spine. The drink was fusing his DNA with the residual canine dander in the car. Ben's fingernails elongated into obsidian claws, and his pupils narrowed into golden slits. He felt a surge of zoomorphic power. He stepped out of the car, and his muscles rippled with the strength of a predator. He wasn't a man anymore, but he wasn't an animal either. He was something in between, a chimera. When a group of looters tried to overturn an ambulance, Ben moved with a blur of feral grace, pinning them down with a strength that was half human and half beast. He realized he could communicate with Kaiser. They weren't just partners, they were a pack. But as he looked at his reflection in the glass of a storefront, he wondered if he would ever be able to retract the claws, or if the beast was here to stay. Chapter 14, The Living Circuit. Sam was an electrician for the city, working on a transformer that had blown during the initial ascension surges. He was exhausted, his nerves frayed, and he leaned against the humming metal box while drinking his Ameliorate. A stray spark jumped from a frayed wire, hitting the can in his hand. Usually, the voltage would have stopped his heart. Instead, the liquid inside acted as a conductor, pulling the electricity into Sam's body and storing it. He felt a rush of euphoria unlike anything he'd ever known. His skin began to glow with a soft blue bioluminescence. He wasn't Sam the electrician anymore, he was a battery. He reached out and touched a dead street lamp, and it didn't just flicker on. It exploded with light so bright it blinded the entire block. He realized he could feel the power grid of New Viridia like a map of veins. But he was also hungry for it. He felt a physical need to be near high-voltage lines. He walked toward the downtown area, where the neon signs were thickest. As he walked, his feet left scorched footprints on the asphalt. He saw a news helicopter circling overhead and pointed a finger at it. A small arc of lightning danced between his knuckles. He realized he could be the city's greatest power source, or its most dangerous short circuit. Chapter 15, The Watchman's Echo. Silas was 80 years old and had seen New Viridia change from a quiet coastal town to a concrete jungle. He worked as a night watchman at the Historical Society, mostly just to keep his mind sharp. He drank the Ameliorate 3X because the label promised vitality, and at his age, he needed all he could get. But the compound X7 didn't care about his age. It targeted his perception of reality. As he walked his rounds, Silas suddenly saw a ghost of himself walk through the door 10 seconds before he reached it. He stopped, confused. Then he saw the ghost slip and fall. 10 seconds later, Silas reached the spot, slipped on a wet patch, and fell. He realized he wasn't seeing ghosts. He was seeing the immediate future. He was a chrono watcher. He closed his eyes and pushed his mind forward. He saw the Apex bottling trucks arriving at the museum. He saw the men in suits coming for him. He saw himself being captured. Then he focused on now. He reached out his hand and felt the flow of time like a river. With a grunt of effort, he tugged on the water. The world around him slowed to a crawl. A fly froze in midair. Silas walked calmly past the security cameras, which were now recording at 1 frame per minute, and exited the building. He had seen where this was going. He knew the 15 of them were destined to meet at the harbor. He began to walk, every step guided by a future he had already lived. Chapter 16. The Gathering at Pier 9. The air at Onyx Harbor was thick with the scent of salt and an undeniable smell. One by one, the monsters arrived. The skyward guard descended from the clouds, landing softly near Sarah, who was currently lifting a forklift just to vent her nervous energy. Toby the Blur arrived in a literal crack of thunder, his shoes smoking as he finally came to a halt. Then came the twins, Cinder and Rhyme, a walking contradiction of steam and frost that made the pavement hiss. "Is this everyone?" Leo asked, his fiery hand illuminating the dark pier. "Not yet," a voice echoed, not in their ears but inside their skulls. Dr. Eris stepped out from the shadows of a warehouse, his eyes glowing with a soft violet hue. Behind him walked Elena, her hair braided into a defensive mantle, and Arthur, who flickered in and out of visibility like a dying light bulb. They stood in a circle, 15 strangers united by a chemical mistake. There was no trust, only a shared sense of terrifying transformation. Silas, the old watchman, tapped his cane. "You have 5 minutes before the hunters arrive," he croaked. "I've seen it. They have weapons designed for us." He looked at Sam, the battery, and Maya, the phase shifter. "If we don't stand together, we become property of the factory again." Chapter 17. The Apex Harvesters. Silas's prophecy was accurate to the second. From the dark waters of the harbor, 3 black sleek hovercrafts rose, emblazoned with the Apex Bottling Corp logo. From the land side, armored transport trucks cut off the exits. This wasn't the police. These were the Harvesters, a private military force equipped with Compound X7 neutralizing technology. The Harvesters didn't offer a surrender. They fired nullnets, conductive mesh webs designed to drain superhuman energy. One hit Sam, and the living battery screamed as his blue glow was sucked into the net, leaving him weakened and gasping. Another net targeted the twins, but Jax reacted instantly, throwing up a wall of jagged ice that shattered the projectile. "Fight back!" Sarah roared. She grabbed a massive iron mooring bollard, ripped it from the concrete, and hurled it at a transport truck, flipping the vehicle like a toy. Marcus took to the sky, diving at the hovercrafts, but they emitted a high-frequency sonic blast that sent him spiraling. The heroes were powerful, but they were uncoordinated. They were individuals fighting a machine, and the machine was winning. Chapter 18. The Synergized Strike. Dr. Eris, Cerebro, realized that if they didn't act as one, they would be caged by midnight. He pushed his mind to its limit, forcibly linking the consciousness of all 15 heroes. For a split second, they didn't just see each other. They were each other. Toby felt Sarah's strength, Mia felt Silas's foresight, the twins felt Arthur's stealth. "Now!" Eris's command echoed through their collective mind. The counterattack was a masterpiece of accidental teamwork. Arthur turned the entire group invisible for 10 seconds, allowing them to reposition. When they reappeared, Roulette Lou nudged the probability of the Harvester's weapons, causing every single gun to jam simultaneously. The Chimera and the Hairweaver moved in tandem, Elena's hair binding the soldiers while Ben's feral strength dismantled their armor. Finally, Mia, the reality warper, touched the water of the harbor and imagined it as solid ground. The surface turned to glass, allowing the ground-based heroes to charge the hovercrafts. With one final burst of synchronized power, the battery and the fire twin combined their energy, creating a massive plasma blast that disabled the Apex fleet. The Harvesters retreated into the dark, but the victory felt hollow. They were now outlaws in their own state. Chapter 19. the concrete cathedral. Underneath the abandoned New Viridia subway system lay a ghost station, known as Cathedral Square. Forgotten since the 1950s, its vaulted ceilings and mosaic tiles were hidden behind a wall of solid rock. Using his matter manipulation, Bill, the architect, softened the stone like clay, allowing the 15 to slip inside before sealing the entrance shut. The station was cold, but Sam, the battery, touched the old copper wiring, sending a low-voltage pulse through the tracks that lit up the dust-covered chandeliers. This would be their base zero. Mia, the reality warper, focused her mind, turning the grime-streaked walls into comfortable living quarters, while Cerebro set up a psychic perimeter to mask their brain waves from Vane's sensors. As they sat in the dim light, the adrenaline faded, replaced by the weight of their new reality. They weren't just people anymore, they were a new species. Vane won't stop, Silas warned, his eyes milk-white as he peered into the next hour. He's not just sending soldiers anymore. He's becoming the weapon. They realized that the factory wasn't just a place where the drink was made. It was the heart of a spreading infection. Chapter 20. The Overclock Evolution. Back at the Apex bottling plant, Victor Vane was no longer sitting in a boardroom. He had moved his office into the black vat chamber. His skin had turned a translucent, bruised purple, and his movements were so fast they left after images in the air. He was overclocked. By drinking a pure, undiluted concentrate of compound X7, he had forced his brain to process the entire world at 1,000,000 cycles per second. To Vane, the heroes were moving in slow motion, like insects trapped in amber. He watched the security footage of the harbor battle, his eyes darting across 20 screens at once. "They think they are heroes," Vane hissed, his voice sounding like a swarm of bees due to his accelerated vocal cords. "But they are just the beta test." Vane plugged himself into the factory's central mainframe. His hypercognition allowed him to rewrite the factory's AI in seconds. He began designing a new generation of Ameliorate drones. Machines that didn't just fight, but could mimic the powers of the heroes they encountered. He didn't need to capture them anymore. He just needed to observe them long enough to steal their data. Chapter 21. The First Incursion. The peace of the underground sanctuary was shattered when Arthur, the ghost, felt a strange vibration in the air. "Something is coming," he whispered, his body flickering into total invisibility. "It doesn't have a heartbeat. I can't hear it, but I can feel the space it's taking up." Suddenly, the steel tracks of the subway began to groan. 3 metallic spheres, glowing with a sickly violet light, floated into the station. These were Vane's mirror drones. As the heroes rose to fight, the drones shifted shape. One grew long, prehensile cables like Elena's hair. Another began to glow with blue electricity like Sam. A third vibrated at a frequency that allowed it to pass through Sarah's punches. "It's a trap," Cerebro shouted, trying to jam the drone's signals. But the drones weren't there to kill, they were there to scan. Every time a hero used their power, the drone's lights turned green, uploading the biological signature back to Vane. The heroes were being stripped of their secrets in their own home. Sarah grabbed a drone and crushed it with her bare hands, but as it died, it emitted a high-frequency pulse that knocked everyone to the ground. The location of Base Zero was no longer a secret. Chapter 22. The March on Onyx Harbor. The 15 heroes emerged from the subway tunnels like a myth come to life. As they marched toward the industrial district, the citizens of New Viridia watched from their windows. Some cheered, but many looked on in terror. The sky over the Apex bottling plant had turned a swirling, bruised purple, a permanent storm of compound X7 vapor. "We don't just shut down the factory," Sarah commanded, her voice booming with the authority of her newfound strength. "We destroy the formula. If that liquid stays on this earth, no one is ever truly free." Behind her, the others prepared for the end. Toby, the blur, was a constant crackle of sonic booms, running circles around the group to scout for ambushes. The twins, Cinder and Rhyme, walked hand in hand, a perfect balance of steam that obscured their approach. They were no longer the confused victims who had woken up in an alley. They were a tactical unit. As they crossed the final bridge into Onyx Harbor, they saw the nightmare Vane had been building. Thousands of Ameliorate soldiers. Regular security guards who had been force-fed the concentrate, their eyes glowing with a mindless feral hunger. Chapter 23. The Ameliorate Army. The clash was unlike any battle in history. The Ameliorate Army didn't have the unique, specialized powers of the 15. Instead, they were standardized ascendants. Each one possessed a low-level version of super strength and speed, but they lacked individual wills. They moved like a hive mind, directed by the overclocked consciousness of Victor Vane. "They're not even human anymore," Officer Ben growled, his chimera claws extending as he leaped into the fray. He moved with animalistic ferocity, but for every soldier he pinned, 3 more took their place. The battlefield was a chaotic symphony of elements. Sam, the battery, channeled the city's entire power grid into a massive shockwave, clearing a path for Bill, the architect, to liquefy the asphalt beneath the army's feet, trapping them in stone. However, Vane's mirror drones surged from the factory vents, reflecting the heroes' attacks back at them. The Skyward Guard was knocked from the air by a drone mimicking his own flight patterns, and Elena, the Velvet Lasso, found her hair being countered by metallic whips. They were winning the ground war, but the factory was draining them, feeding on the very energy they used to fight. Chapter 24. The Heart of the Machine. Cerebro and Silas led the core team, Maya, Arthur, and Mia, into the depths of the factory. While the others fought the army outside, this strike team had one mission: reach the Black Vat. They phased through walls and moved through the shadows of the future, avoiding the automated turrets that Vane had placed in every corridor. When they finally reached the central chamber, they found Victor Vane. He was no longer a man, he was fused to the machinery, his nervous system plugged directly into the massive vats of Compound X7. His body flickered in and out of the timeline, moving so fast he appeared to be in 5 places at once. "You think you are the heroes of this story?" Vane's voice vibrated through the floor. "You are just the waste product of progress. I am the evolution." With a gesture, Vane manipulated the gravity in the room, pinning Cerebro and Silas to the ceiling. Mia, the reality warper, tried to change the liquid in the vats to water, but Vane's hypercognition countered her every thought before she could finish it. He was thinking a million steps ahead. It wasn't a fight of strength, it was a fight of mental processing speed. As Vane prepared to reabsorb their DNA to finalize his godhood, Silas whispered to Mia, "Don't think about what is, think about what cannot be." Chapter 25. The Final Overclock. The air in the Black Vat chamber felt like static electricity against the skin. Victor Vane was a blur of violet light. His consciousness spread across the factory's mainframe like a digital plague. He laughed, a sound that echoed through the past, present, and future simultaneously. "I have calculated every move you can make, Silas. I have mapped the probability of your victory, and it is 0. But Silas, the old watchman, didn't look afraid. He looked at Mia, the reality warper, and nodded. "He only calculates what he can perceive," Silas wheezed. "But he cannot perceive a mind that refuses to follow logic." Mia closed her eyes. Instead of trying to fight Vane with fire or force, she reached into the very center of her imagination. She didn't think about weapons. She thought about the absurd. She imagined the Compound X7 not as a mutagen, but as a melody. She imagined the factory not as a machine, but as a giant glass heart. She projected a reality where the laws of physics were replaced by the laws of poetry. The effect was instantaneous. Vane's hypercognition, designed for cold, hard logic and rapid calculation, began to divide by 0. His mind seized as he tried to process a reality that didn't make sense. The purple glow in his veins began to flicker and spark. "System error." Vane's voice cracked. Outside, the 14 other heroes felt the shift. Cerebro used the moment of Vane's mental collapse to broadcast a final psychic command to the group. "All of you, channel everything into the vat." The Skyward Guard dove from the sky like a meteor. Sarah delivered a blow that cracked the very foundation of the building. The twins unleashed a blast of thermal shock that shattered the reinforced glass of the tanks. Sam, the battery, discharged every joule of energy he had left into the liquid. The explosion wasn't made of fire, but of light. The Compound X7 didn't burn. It evaporated, turning into a harmless, sparkling mist that drifted over New Viridia. Victor Vane was gone, his consciousness scattered into the vacuum of a reality he couldn't control. As the sun rose over the ruins of the Apex bottling plant, the 15 stood together on the charred docks. The Ameliorate army had reverted to confused civilians, the chemical trance broken. The state of New Viridia was scarred but silent. "What now?" Toby asked, his feet finally still. "Now," Silas said, looking at the city skyline, "we watch. Because the world knows we exist now. And we aren't the only thing the factory left behind." The 15 heroes looked out over their home, no longer victims of a drink, but the first line of defense for a new world.